Thank you for coming to this plenary session, which is the Campion lecture. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome our distinguished guest, Professor Bin Yu of the University of Berkeley, to deliver the Campion lecture. And I'm honored that Professor Yu has accepted my invitation. Let me start with some background on the Campion lecture. The late Sir Harry Campion was the first director of the Central Statistical Office, the forerunner of the Office for National Statistics. He held the post from 1941 until he retired in 1967. Campion was also the inaugural director of the United Nations Statistical Office. Campion was the Royal Statistical Society president from 1957 to 1959, and kindly left the society a generous legacy to support future statisticians. Last year, Campion lecturer was Professor Kerry Mengerson from the University of Brisbane. Now, turning to Professor Yu, it's difficult to summarize in a few words Professor Yu's immense achievements. Professor Yu is currently Chancellor Distinguished Professor and Chair in the Department of Statistical and Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at UC Berkeley. Professor Yu obtained her Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from Peking University and her Master and PhD degrees in statistics from the University of Berkeley. She was Assistant Professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has held many visiting positions around the world. At Berkeley, she currently leads the U Group, which consists of about 15 to 20 students and postdocs from statistics and electrical engineering and computer science. She was formally trained as a statistician, but her research extends beyond the realm of statistics. And together with her group, her work has leverage new computational development to solve important scientific problems by combining novel statistical machine learning approaches with domain expertise of her many collaborators, in particular in neuroscience, genomics, and precision medicine. She and her team developed relevant theory to understand random forest and deep learning for gaining insight and guidance into practice. She has numerous honorary positions. She's a member of the US National Academy of Science and of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She's past president of the Institute of Mathematical Statistics, Guggenheim Fellow, Tukey Memorial Lecturer of the Bernoulli Society, Rees Lecturer of the IMS, and a Committee of Presidents of Statistical Society prize winner. She recently, and she is very proud to have obtained an honorary doctorate from the University of Lausanne, Faculty of Business and Economics in Switzerland. She's serving on the editorial board of numerous journals, but in particular the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and she's on the Scientific Advisory Committee of the UK Turing Institute for Data Science and AI. So as the RSS has launched at the beginning of 2021, a strategic initiative in data science and convened a task force to investigate how the RSS can deepen and extend its impact on the field of data science, we very much look forward to hear Professor Yu's thoughts on what she has called the data science life cycle. So I would like now to invite Professor Yu to present her lecture on Veridical Data Science, the practice of responsible data analysis and decision-making. This lecture will be delivered by video link. So can we all welcome Bin Yu?
Thank you, Sylvia, for the invitation. I'm deeply honored to give the Campion lecture. And as Sylvia already said, that Sir Harry Campion made tremendous contributions to statistics outside the academia and was a leader after the Second World War. And I think there's a lot for us to be learned from Sir Campion, and more than half a century later, we're now in the age of AI. And even in the realm of official statistics, recently US Census Bureau used differential privacy to mask the data for use. So you can see that technology and differential privacy really was inspired from cryptography, very much CS. And we're in a world where AI is like nuclear energy, as Bill Gates said, both promising and dangerous. And data science is becoming a key element of AI because under any AI devices, there's always a data component. And we have seen Venn diagram from Conway, computer science, math stats, and domain knowledge really integrated together to form the new field of data science. And machine learning sits in the middle of computer science statistics. My view is that machine learning is part of modern statistics. To really work towards trustworthy AI or trustworthy data science, I like to advocate the best practice approach to maximize the promise, and the other approach is really damage control to reduce the danger. And I think statistics, especially applied statistics, will have much wealth to contribute to this trustworthy AI's data science. In a paper published last year in PNS, we published a paper with my former student, Campion, to define veridical data science. Veridical means truthful, and it's still very much in use in Spanish, but not so much in English. So we define something which give a name to really emphasize the reliability and reproducibility of the information. I also want to expand our technical language to describe the ever-complexing landscape of data analysis we are facing, and to communicate and also put enough adequate emphasis on empirical evidence, and also in the context of human decision domain knowledge, so that we can realize the promise and mitigate the danger. My group has been for the last 10 years, mostly in biomedical sphere, and just really pressing problem from basic science to precision medicine. And one project I engaged for the last 2 or 3 years with a researcher from UCSF and Stanford under the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub. It's a team of people, senior researchers and wonderful, talented young researchers that try to develop the whole pipeline from data analysis, actually we use UK Biobank data, and to experiments for cardiovascular health. You can see it's a large team of people. If we take a step back, look at the bio project as a data science problem, the medical problem we're asking is what genes interact with my drive on this particular heart disease called HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So it's a thickening of the left ventricle wall to cause heart problems. And it's relatively rare, 1 in 500 occurrence in the US. So the data is not always balanced and skewed. And the question what data to use, we decided to go for UK Biobank data because it's a really wealth of information, both including imaging and genomic data, and how you clean it. To be honest, my group didn't engage in the cleaning part. And then you understand the data through EDA, and then the next question, how do you find the nonlinear interaction? What algorithm are you going to use? There's also interpretation evaluation, including knockout experiments. In every step of the way, I want us to recognize the number of judgment calls we make, human judgment calls. And I'd like to make that part transparent and documented. The data science lifecycle is a term I picked up with a CS colleague when I co-taught Data Science 100 at Berkeley with my colleague Deb Nolan, and also two computer scientists, Joe Gonzalez and Joe Halliston. So it was a new term. I think if you go to George Box, you might have this process idea already, but this term, I think is very much in use in data science. So I think I just adopted. So this is really just look at all the steps. I'll give you an example. I want to emphasize the human aspect to this process. I'm very much into human in the loop AI, not complete automated AI. And the human contribution, the judgment calls, what we do make a huge difference. So I think scientific conclusions must reflect reality and to be stable to human judgment calls in every step of the data science lifecycle. So we need really this quality control idea. I mean, statistics, we really champion focusing in manufacturing, but data science is also a process. It's a dry lab or dry factory that we also need to have quality control standards and standardization. And these have to build on best empirical practices. And my kind of inroad into machine learning was very much encouraged by my late colleague, Leo Bryman, who had this paper 20 years ago to contrast the machine learning culture based on algorithm to the data culture, which is generative model. I still think if you have a very trustworthy generative model, definitely go for that one. But right now, even the statistical model, we write it as a probabilistic model, but often the assumptions cannot or are not checked. So we're very much similar, just the way we derive algorithms. They call loss functions and we call generative model, but if the probabilistic components are not valid, we are just basically deriving algorithm as well. And cross-validation invented by statisticians have been a workhorse for machine learning to this day. So the framework my group developed, we call Predictability, Computability, Stability, or PCS framework, is really try to integrate the two cultures and for Veridical Data Science. So for the rest of the talk, I will describe the conceptual framework, a PCS, and then go to a case study how the ideas and principles of PCS drove a new methodology development in the context of a Drosophila biology problem called the E2 random forest, building on Leo's work, random forest. And then we move to a problem back to the cardiovascular health to calculate PCS p-values, which is more robust to non-hypothesis than the classical approach, and for epistatic interaction. Epistatic means nonlinear interaction between genes. And I'll end with two software development in my group. One is called Veridical Flow in Python to ease the use of the PCS conceptual framework, and SimShelf is the other arm of the PCS, which is data-inspired simulation made easy. So coming back to Leo's work, building on prior work, and we try to make bigger bridges between machine learning and statistics and integrate them. So the paper I mentioned earlier use PCS as the principles. You can see that predictability from machine learning and stats, computability more, statistics, we always do computation, but it was really machine learning put the computability at the center. And stability is really expansion of our inference from sample to sample variability, which is a perturbation, to all steps in the data science lifecycle. Problem formulation, there could be multiple problem formulation about the same domain problem. Do we end up with the same conclusion? Data cleaning, we can clean the data in different ways. So in applied statistics class I'm teaching right now in Berkeley 215A, I have like 40 students. The first lab is on data cleaning with some sensor data redwood trees. They will end up with basically 40 different versions of clean data. Do they get the same conclusion in the end? So PCS unifies, streamlines, expands ideas and best practices in both machine learning and statistics, and give us a platform and coherent platform to move forward. So here's a tree to demonstrate how they relate together. So I start pursuing the stability principle. Actually, the opportunity of giving Tukey lecture was the impetus, try to put my thoughts together and combine data stability with, which is very much bootstrap and subsampling, with model stability, which was advocated by John Tukey, or started by John Tukey in robust statistics. So this was very much about the modeling stage. We want reproducibility. Interval result also needs stability. And you can also go back to quotes by Plato, even saying that knowledge has to be tied down, unlike opinions that can change day to day. So it's really a common sense principle. And PCS also connects with science with engineering. I believe data science is both a scientific field and an engineering field. Predictability and stability embed two important scientific principles of prediction and replication. And computability, of course, it's about how fast you can compute, how much memory you have, how much you can communicate between different nodes in a network. But we also include data-inspired simulations, which is a very useful, I would say, platform for us to develop more trustworthy methods, because you can simulate many different scenarios, not just the one in your theoretical work that you already prove theorems about. But even there, you can break the conditions in your theorem and see how things work. So I think we need to utilize data-inspired simulations much more, which we use a lot in the development of iterative random forest. So PCS in a nutshell, we need to start with predictability for our old, we call model diagnosis or reality check. But predictability is really more beyond that just cross-validation, which is a weaker form of reality check because you reuse the data or proper set. But it's also about transfer learning, all the things you want to really do in practice. After you have reality check, you can talk about stability. Without reality check, we don't need to worry about stability. And then computability is embedded in both P and S. If you think about the data science life as like a hardware, you have different parts, components. You really want to make sure that the part, when you change it to these different human judgment call parts, you still have a system that works, or you shake it, it doesn't break, right? How much you shake it really depends on the situation, right? So I have an iPhone. When they test the iPhone, I'm sure they did test if the phone drops to the floor from my pocket, it should still hold. But probably if you throw your cell phone to a hard wall very hard, there's probably no guarantee that won't break. So the situation of the shaking or the perturbation we do is also context dependent. So you have to argue what's a reasonable perturbation. For stress tests, you will stress really hard if you worry about high stake situations, or you do reasonable perturbation as things could have been observed and didn't observe. And this is really user defined, and the user should also define a stability metric or multiple stability metric. And so that we ensure that the results are stable or robust to all these perturbations we argue to be reasonable and recorded. So documentation is a huge part of a PCS framework. You have reality in the red circle, and you have the blue circle models. The models are mental constructs, unless you build a bridge through quantitative and qualitative narrative in, say, Python, Jupyter Notebook or R Markdown, and you record your judgment calls when you don't have a solid foundation. So the models don't always have to capture reality. It's our job to kind of make the link, make the bridge, and have the symbols embedded in code and models have physical correspondences. We have been also working with an ER doctor at UCSF. So I asked him, he kind of saw me out here after hearing a short talk I gave on PCS 2 or 3 years ago in a UC gathering on medicine and AI. So to him, the PCS framework builds a working relation between data and the clinical work, and PCS look under the hood to ensure that conclusions from data are what the data generally suggests. In all PCS holistic approach to helping the clinician, we can say data science, understand, interpret, and build the science, we need to help our patient for us, our customers. So what we did with him, there's a clinical decision rule, CDR, called PCAR, used in ER departments to decide whether a child with abdominal injury should be sent to CT. So we basically reanalyze data and use the PCS framework and rederive, basically backed up their clinical decision rule. And we had also external study. I think that's a lot better than split the data you have. Other people carried out similar study and to validate the conclusion. Data preprocessing is often put under the rug in this data science lifecycle. Anybody who have worked with raw data know easily 80% of your human time is spent on data preprocessing. But our framework, so far, the statistical or machine learning framework doesn't really take that into account formally. We clean the data and then we start putting probabilistic models or run a empirical loss function. So I think we need to really include this very important part of the data science lifecycle into our conclusions, our perturbations. One case in economics really shows the importance of doing the data preprocessing as rigorously as we can. So two economists from Harvard published a paper about 10 years ago, and they use year and country as their basic unit, and they show that if the debt to public debt to GDP ratio is beyond like 90%, then the country have slow growth. And this was used to support austerity policy in UK and Europe, probably in the US too. 4 years later, 3 other economists from University of Manchester in Amherst tried to reproduce the result. And they find that 3 data points for New Zealand were excluded for some reason, still don't know why. Some coding errors and some unconventional weighting. After all that got rectified, the conclusion fails to hold. So this is really high impact policy. And this is not really sophisticated, huge data, but still the cleaning step or oversight have really caused very different conclusions. We're working with the Ashley Lab to study HCM, and we recommended gene interaction. They actually did knockout experiment, RNA knockout experiments. And we're looking at the cell sizes because the conjecture was that certain genes, when you knock them out, you might induce the cell size to be big and therefore cause problems when they, with the heart muscles. So we have low resolution for high throughput and high resolution. You can see the cells are clumped. So now we try to deconvolute the cells or show that they're changing the experiments too, so that we don't have so many cells clumped. So if you use high resolution, low resolution images, you might end up with different conclusions. So this is data choice also make a difference. We have a lot of choices now, especially in genomics. And phenotype, right? Which phenotype you take, even the UK Biobank data, it also make a difference. And common practice in statistical machine learning that we usually split the data. It's a simple way to do selective inference. And different people create different splits. This is a paper published recently from my group that we're looking for subgroups in a clinical trial data to study a painkiller called Vioxx. And with also David Madigan was the other senior lead. And we split the data into 5 bits. We set aside the dark blue block as test. One thing to keep in mind is that the test should be a good surrogate for future data. We did actually both random split, which make the 2 parts too similar. And we also did a time split. I think it's more reasonable. And then for the training data, we also did one called validation fold. But we did 5, why not 6? So this is still a judgment call. But we need to record it and make an argument why this is a good approach. And then we come to the choice of algorithms, also called model perturbation. This is really in the spirit of robust statistics. And different people trained in different algorithms, and we happen to just going to use the algorithm we're more familiar with. But with the availability of software, I think we should try beyond what we're trained for and try other algorithms so that we make sure that the conclusion is not an artifact of the algorithm we're familiar with or we chose. And climate scientists already talking, using these multiple model approaches, right? All the global temperature rise estimate, you see 9 models. And it gives a very good range, 1.5 degree at the end of the century or 5.5. It's a big range. So this is already it's a very informative for policy and intervention or adaptivity to the climate change. We shouldn't be just thinking it's 1.5, right? It's probably most likely not, and the range. So they're already doing these multiple model approaches in scientific work. And this is also, it's researcher to researcher or team perturbation. And back to the epistatic nonlinear interaction for the heart cardiovascular health problem. Fisher 1919 really postulated a polynomial kind of interaction. You have main effects and polynomial effect. You take a logic scale for the penetration, which is giving gene A and B, what's the probability for, say, a heart disease, a patient with heart disease. But this scale was kind of arbitrary. You can take the logic, you can take the penetration directly, and you can do multiplicative. And actually, if you do main effect and the second order, third order, fourth order, the explosion of terms quickly run out of data for you. So therefore, you just cannot do the search anymore. Or you can do decision trees. Actually, there's biological evidence to show that gene and gene interaction happen in a thresholding manner because the balanced biomolecules have to exceed certain threshold for them to interact. So you can take CART or decision tree, or you can take a smooth version of random forest. So there's different forms of interaction. And there was a theorem, the Kromgorff-Arnold theorem, saying that if you don't give any scale, any function smooth enough can be written as the additive. So this is mathematics also saying that you need to change the scale. You need to give more boundaries for your discovery to be reasonable. So now you have multiple choices to discover the nonlinear interactions. So you have so explosion of human judgment. Every step you have a multiple, right? This is just going to be combinatorial, which is not feasible in practice. So every step you have multiple choices, right? RNA-seq data, you have different normalization packages. So the recommendation I would like to give is that I should now move from just one clean version of the data. We should at least keep two clean versions of data, just so we can run to see whether that'll make a difference. And the PCS framework also says that there are different models. You keep only the ones who give good prediction performance. Of course, this is domain context dependent. You screen models, you don't keep everything, and you keep the good ones. And also, I think we should move away from the best model because we really don't have any. We should keep like a screened ensemble of models. And then for each step, we can select one of these choices. You might even put weight, kind of go in the Bayesian way, because the expert may say, well, I trust the RNA-seq normalization package 1 better than 2, so I may give some preference or try that more. So you can take n paths and then do n rounds of different analysis, go through the data science pipeline and record its judgment calls and compare. If you don't really know which one you should favor, they're equally good, then you should really trust the conclusion that are stable or consistent across these different paths. And our software package is we call Veridical Flow is try to make this different steps choices more easily done and streamline the computation, the memory space, all of that. So you don't have to program up. So next I want to move to a case study, which is really was done before PCS paper came out. So this was led by former postdoc by now Cornell and former student Campion and my long-term collaborator Dan Brown, Abby and now Lawrence Berkeley lab and also in the department. So we try to do pattern discovery, right? In computer vision, you want to look for a cat, you find it. And in genomics, it's a lot harder. In other areas, in material science, you want to know what are the factors that drive a particular material property. So you don't know what you're looking for. And we know that from Drosophila genomics, genetics, that there are fourth order interactions. So it's not just second order. And we also know, this is also example from Drosophila. I work with Sue Seneca's lab from Lawrence Berkeley lab. There's something called the French flag model. Says that for biomolecules to interact, they usually need to reach a certain level of abundance. So this really, give biological motivation for going for decision of card-like mathematical entities instead of linear and polynomial. And random forest for this crowd, I don't think I need to say much. And people know that if you take two genes or two features genes on the same path of a tree in the random forest. People already use that, say that means interaction. So that's a jump from analytical interaction to biological interaction. But that idea kind of hit a wall because the interactions were not stable. So what we did is to add stability through a soft dimensionality reduction. In random forest, you sample the genes or features uniformly. So the first step of iterative random forest, we also do that uniform. And then we have importance. You can also add in your own importance. And you sample now according to the importance. The more important one get more weight. And we have random intersection trees taken from Schar and Manhausen, a European statistician, find interaction to speed up, and we have an after loop assess stability. So here's some results for Drosophila enhancer prediction problem. You can see for this problem, we didn't lose, with adding the stability, we didn't lose predictive performance. RC curve on a test set basically stayed the same. On the right, you see the stability score on the x-axis. On the y-axis are the names, pairs, red pairs of genes from Drosophila, and blue as three-way interactions. And for the red one, we're pleased to find that 80% of the discoveries we find actually already validated in past biological experiments, physical experiments in the literature. So that was a success. And the blue ones become scientific recommendation. I think a lot of what we do as statisticians today is really become a scientific recommendation for the lab to do their work or other external studies. And we also put enhanced version of RF we call SURF, signed RF. Instead of two genes interact, we say they have to have certain high level positive to interact, putting on the very popular UC Santa Cruz genome browser for Drosophila researcher to use. So we're doing a lot more software development. So back to the BioHub project, we end up not taking the HCM label from Biobank because there are a lot of false negatives. Many people wish the problem not diagnosed. So we use a proxy, which is more solid measurement from the MRI of heart, that measure the left ventricle wall size. And we did basically use iterative random forest and the enhanced version with more bells and whistles. We found 4 predictive gene pairs, and Ashley's lab have finished at least 2 pairs for experiments and with promising results. We're now reanalyzing the image data. So this again is a team work, and I want to shout out for Tiffany, who is the lead from my group. So the next part, I want to talk a little bit about how do we make inference robust. So my view about statistical inference that we're really providing evidence for decision making. We cannot really say the p-value less than something that's proven. We just don't have that strong evidence. So the goal is to make things transparent and robust to all the deviation we have in practice. So the PCS inference is doesn't assume probability generated models. If you have a good probability generated model, then you're basically doing statistical inference. You can call confidence intervals. Otherwise, we call perturbation intervals, like the 9 climate models. It's a perturbation interval. So the naming make it very clear that we're not vetting the probability generated models. When you can, but you still have a problem most time actually with the data cleaning step. I don't know how to do that, and it's really a perturbation analysis there. So we actually, again, I want to point a shout out for Merbo, who is now back, my postdoc, who's back to Germany, and Campion now at UCSF. And also James Priest, who is a collaborator from Stanford. The main people, it's a teamwork. So what do we build? We call epi-tree pipeline. We use iterative random forest to find gene interactions to shrink down, and then we do selective inference by using only the test data for the p-value calculation, and we devise a new PCS epi-tree test, basically building a more robust non-hypothesis. So we get more conservative p-values. Instead, we haven't done we took a different approach for the heart disease, but this is actually earlier than the thing I presented. We used the red hair phenotype from the UK Biobank, and we split data, made them balanced. So the data was UK Biobank, was a SNP data, and we used a biologically inspired predict scan, very commonly used, to go to gene level, and we use each random forest to shrink down the gene interactions. It's like basically RF works as a nonlinear model selection. And then we test the selected gene to see whether it's epistasis on the test set. And then there's a mapping back, even non-coding region, to the genes or something like genes. And then we shrink the SNP data by using the mapping back from the gene, and then we look at interaction at the SNP level. So after iterative random forest at the gene level selection, we end up with 18 pairs of order 2 or higher. And this is a very interesting case. So take a look at this AUC curve. So we have 4 curves. The purple one is Ranger, basically it's a version of random forest. And then Lasso has more constraint, more regularity, does better, which is a blue curve. And then if you do the RF with SNP, you get the best result. With SNP, no second best, and the best is the random forest iterative gene. So this is that if you add random stability to random forest, you also improve the prediction accuracy. So it's all relative. Random forest for this data is very relatively noisy, doesn't have enough regularity. So when you add stability through the soft dimensionality reduction, you actually give the needed regularity and can improve prediction. So it's not like you add stability always makes things worse. That can happen, like the other software data, things didn't change prediction-wise, but here you actually improve. So it really depends on the problem. And we look at the annotated databases and make sure that what we find are reasonable, both in terms of protein interaction and also the goal search. So now back, how we're going to do the test. So we decide to go for use the penetration as the scale instead of logit, and we're going for decision tree interaction. So the decision tree or car type of models capture the thresholding behavior, but also capture data squeezing, right? So this is the gene level. You can see that the data on the right have the stripe phenomenon because it's a SNP data discrete, so the predict scan make it continuous. But the fundamental data is discrete. So the data, the stripe at the gene level is there, and the card is able to capture the stripe behavior and also fit better than the linear model. And then we have a new version with got graph interaction, but this is the version on the internet, on the web. What we did is we take the null hypothesis as the 2 decision trees. Now we also include a composite hypothesis, which is just 1 decision tree of 2. The new version, which still have to be put on the web. And the alternative is just a 2-way interaction. With them, you can see the 2 genes interact together. And then we end up with using this, we also do more data perturbation than traditionally done. So we basically build a more robust null hypothesis. As a result, we have more realistic magnitude for the p-value, more 10 to the minus 5 or minus 2 instead of 10 to the minus 11 if you use OGS and chi-square type of approximation. Okay, also use this package from our group called Superheat. We can build features now based on the interactions, basically just feed the random forest using the selected features and ask them and do a linear prediction. And you can see the red hair group on the right block really are 3 groups, right? Different genes act together in different ways, and you see very clear 3 groups. And the others, you can see 1 group actually very similar to red group. Maybe people just didn't report the card of hair because the hair, there's also different, more finer deviations of red hair or not. So, and we basically confirm the early analysis, and we also find some novel high order interaction. But the result need more validation. So for the last bit, the software bit, that for people to use PCS, we have to make software available, right? More and more clear that if we want to make an impact, we have to do software. Otherwise, very few people are going to program out what you write in the paper. So we have these 5 or 6 design principles. You can see it as we want the software to be transparent, to be realistic, in the sense, especially for the second one, simulation, you want data-inspired simulation, which was a big part of the development iterative random forest, because we did many Boolean interactions. We only have one data set we were working with, and we saved another different splicing data set not to use, but we did a lot of simulations, used the Boolean type of additive Boolean interactions to really develop the methodology called iterative random forest. I want the software to be intuitive, modular, so people can put different bits to it, efficient and reproducible. So the vertical flow is ongoing. We have a GitHub. It's kind of beta version. We make the prediction screening, which is part of PCS and stability, simple, reproducible, and computation efficient. We'll create intuitive capacities to inspect, manipulate, and visualize the whole data science or machine learning pipeline. And the people leading this are Chandan Singh from my CS student, which is a fantastic engineer and software, in particular, just really handy and doing a lot of great machine learning work. And also James Duncan, biostat student for me, and also Ivy and Raj, also part of the team. And we build on work from CS, right? Berkeley CS, the system group is super strong, right? They did Databricks, and they have now called the Ray. It's a distributed computing platform. This is all Python, and also MLflow, also come from Databricks. So we're really building on the best CS software development. And we make it agnostic to the underlying framework. You can work with scikit-learn or PyTorch, which is a Facebook deep learning platform, or Glam, which is AWS auto machine learning platform. So we try so that people can easily integrate. We actually start talking to the Glam group to see maybe formally put some of our stuff on their platform. So under the hood, what we did was really try to make the messy stability analysis streamlined and efficient. So it's like data perturbation, right? You have just every step you explosion of the split, the different choices. And what we did is to really combine and connect the non-urgent steps so that the flow is more efficient and you can reuse. The other software package we're working on is because SimShelf is like a shelf, is like, can we streamline or make a very easy software package to do all these different perturbations, right? In terms of generating models. I think we should simulate under reasonable multiple models, and we can evaluate method. And we really follow the principle of a reliable and trustworthy data science. So this is a team led by James Duncan and Corinne and Tiffany Tang, and also Merle and Carl, also part of the team. So there are many existing R packages, and we try to go beyond that, lower the barriers between simulation design, computation, evaluation, visualization, documentation, except for batch tools. I think all the other functionalities, the other simulation tools listed there can be obtained through our package. I think batch tools have a lot of similarity, but I think we also have the big data capacity we're building that will be helpful. So we want the intuitive grammar and to also give the user the capacity to do their own perturbation. And multiple data generation process on romances to be developed, and also greater computation efficiency and flexibility, and also that deal with big data that doesn't fit into the memory. And we also have a really cool interactive PCS documentation in R Markdown for transparent and reproducible documentation and rapid and revertible communication, right? So this is also come with it. You can generate a report much more easily by making selections and putting things together for you. So to summarize, I shared our PCS framework. I hope you find it interesting, and documentation is a big part of the framework for reproducibility. My group has done at least 8 studies with the people develop PCS with me and the new people who was not there, but all worked very well. So I really hope you guys find it interesting. And it can be also used for stress test existing rules. And domain knowledge is hugely important, right? Eventually, we have to match the analytical fiber in your model, in your code with the domain knowledge. And with PCS, you basically add stability to predictability, you can generate a testable hypothesis. It's not causal inference, but you reduce the scope of possibilities for people to do experiment to prove it's causal and for external validation. So these are the papers. I didn't have time to talk about SURF. It's basically a signed version of RF. And we also have now a theory paper on the internet, put it on the ICAP to have this Boolean model to show the model selection consistency of a particular output from a random forest. So have a new model to study random forest instead of just the more continued Lipschitz type of functions. And I think it's a better fit to study decision trees is the Boolean type of models. So all the software packages are on our website. And the two I mentioned are still under development. I also want to give a shout out for another package we developed, have already 10K downloads for interval machine learning called iModels. So check us out. And last, not the least, I'm finishing a book for MIT Press with Rebecca Butter, my former student, current postdoc, have the PCS framework as the guiding principles. And we have a chapter on data cleaning, for example, and also cover every step of data science lifecycle. And we want to have an interactive copy later this fall on the internet. And the statistics department in Berkeley actually now in the process moving into a new division called Computing, Data Science, and Society, headed now by Jennifer Chase. And we have this very well-known now, I think Data 8 is probably used in different forms in like over 300 different colleges. And I had the honor to be on the team for develop Data 8 and now Data 102. And it's co-taught and co-created by Berkeley and like STAT and ECS faculty. So check us out there too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bin, for this fantastic presentation and really spurring us on to think about all the steps of our practice and also showing how, the underlying theory and all the work you've done, merge with all the practice and your thinking. So this is really inspiring. Thank you very much. I'm now opening the floor for some questions. Now we're going to look whether there are questions from the online audiences, but please state your name and raise your hand and state your name when you want to ask a question. Hope I see you, and then you could probably get a microphone. Maybe I could start the ball rolling a bit by asking you a question. You made at the beginning in your whole framework, you really insisted on the judgment and the influence, the fact that there's, human judgment in many of the steps. Do you think experimental design principle could help for this could help inform that judgment? And is there a way of trying to formalize that a little better? I know there's transparency about, explaining all your judgment, but is there some guidance in the judgment that could also be added to the mix?
Indeed, I think the high-level principles of experimental design, I'm sure, still apply here. But the factorial design, I think, is still useful, but we need to go beyond that to really think more from the basic principles of experimental design. Actually, I have a visitor this year from Aman Sabaki from Purdue, and we're talking exactly about these topics. So I think data collection is an overlooked area in data science, but we have to really have new principles and methods that people find useful. And we have to bring our ideas to them instead of anybody asks us about design, we give them a book, right? They're just not going to read, right? So just be realistic. But we have to bring I definitely think the fundamental principles should apply, but the particular practice, I think, has to really be, I would say, aligned with the current practice and the thinking and the human audience. So the book is really a tab. We don't talk about the design, which is a pity because we haven't done any work there. But it's really we want these basic principles to be very accessible to people who are not trained in statistics or machine learning. So kind of, have a low starting point for people to jump in. And like stability, common sense, hope everybody will agree.
Yeah. Can I see any hands raised here? Or I don't want to be the only person asking questions, I'm sure. Is there somebody? Yes, somebody here. Yes, please state your name.
Great.
I can do it without the microphone, I think. You talked a lot about documentation.
Take your mask off, maybe that will help. Yeah.
You talked a lot about documentation, and what we do now is we have analysis plans. Do you think it's important to have all of that documentation in those notebooks, or could you see it in pieces where a lot of it is still spelled out in an analysis plan, in a non-statistician friendly Word document, and then you also have the documentation of those human-driven decisions within the code in a Jupyter Notebook? Do you see a merit of either system?
I would think that any documentation, especially non-documentation, if I have the choice, in my class, we do Jupyter Notebook, right? So in my group projects, everybody's doing that, and we hope to have we have already some sample document to put out there. So you have the choice. Definitely, I would go for Jupyter Notebook with code and, it's interactive documents, but it's still better to do a Word documentation than not doing any documentation. So that's what people come up with. That's a great place to start. Just to document your judgment calls. So some CS colleague of mine is building platform for people in law to use, and they use a spreadsheet, right? So there, I don't think they want to go for Jupyter Notebook, but still, Word documentation would be a good first step for people who are not very techie savvy. Thanks for the question.
Please wave if there's another question. On the second part of your talk, I was wondering, instead of for your epistatic interactions, what is the size limitation? What size of search space can you explore in a feasible manner? I mean, are there any computational limitation?
So the first step using RF is the computation bottleneck. And right now we have a parallel version in Python, but still, so I think the UK Biobank have 80,000 SNPs,
yes.
Right? So it's still too big for us. But when we go to the gene level, we can handle it. So that's to be pushed. We have a Spark version of it, but still, we need to speed that up too. Yeah, right now it's kind of, that's a bottleneck, yeah. But then RF really reduced the dimensionality for us quite tremendously.
I have a question from an online, from Jacqueline Asher, who says, how do you treat sequential incremental learning in this framework, not treating each data set plus analysis as separate?
Yeah, so it's kind of the machine learning people are reinforcement learning, I suppose. So there we have a project, and I think it's still current research. My thoughts are that we can use the different data perturbation to create different scenarios and still use the data, maybe look at prediction errors, and we create some, I would say, independence or kind of decoupled residues. So we did this recent work kind of in that realm, which is predicting COVID deaths at every county for US. So that's a time series, and we didn't have the decision making, but still the residuals what we use. We use something like a revised version conformal analysis. Take the residual, took the maximum, and got pretty good coverage, and we have a lot of data to validate that. So I think we have to seek for something which is relatively not too dependent, and then we can scramble and perturb. either model-based or more non-parametrically?
Is there
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
But even without the TCS framing, I think it's still a very, very difficult area. But the hope is that this stability actually will add to things, then just try to make things more robust.
Thank you. Are there, I think we're very close to the end of the session, unless there's a burning last question. Please wave wildly in the audience. Otherwise, I think we are towards the end of our allotted time, and I would like everybody to join me in thanking you for this very thoughtful, thought-provoking and inspiring lecture.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure. Thank you. Sorry that I couldn't be there. It's a pity. I wish I was in the room.